Welcome to Can They Spider-Man, the series where I analyze artists who draw the famous webhead, and whether they've drawn him for years or just draw him for fun, I let you know whether or not I think they can. Spider-Man. We're starting it off with the man that started it all, Steve Ditko. One of the fathers of Spider-Man, it was Ditko's design that won Stan Lee over and eventually got the character up and running in 1962. Hands down one of the easiest creators to talk about, his design is iconic and to this day very much loved. His original design and concept for Spider-Man is so iconic that it would go unchanged for 20 plus years, and when it did change for the first time, fans instantly wanted it back. This is huge for Ditko, because even to this day, his base formula for Spider-Man and even his rogues gallery is still being done. You don't get that a lot with other characters. For example, Batman, his first appearance is drastically different from his more modern looks. And when talking about his most iconic look, nobody is really talking about that first appearance. It usually branches off into something that is either more modern or something more in the 70s to 90s realm. Spidey's red, blue, and webbing pattern is hands down the most iconic look for the character, and it's all thanks to Ditko. Ditko's main work with Spider-Man comes in the first 38 issues of The Amazing Spider-Man, including the Amazing Fantasy intro and 2 annuals. For the most part, Ditko gives Spider-Man that tall and lanky look. It kind of plays into the whole spider in Spider-Man, and his poses for Spider-Man are both simple, but much like everything else Ditko has done, super influential. Unfortunately, Ditko does come from the era where a lot of unnecessary dialogue and monologue is used, so you do get a lot of repetitiveness with the narration storytelling. In part, I think Ditko comes up with a lot of creative panels. When really analyzing it and looking at the artwork panel by panel, the storytelling of Ditko's illustrations are actually really great. And it's honestly to the point where if you were to skip some of the narration boxes in these panels, you would still be able to follow along just by following the artwork. And sure, that's the Marvel method, but that says a lot to the artist, because if the book is not engaging with just the artwork, it's definitely not going to be with all of that unnecessary dialogue. To me, Ditko executes his part of the storytelling very well. Along with the storytelling, Ditko's Spider-Man does feel very unique. And it's not just because of the art style or because he was the first guy to draw Spider-Man, but there's a bit of eeriness with Ditko's Spidey, and I think that perfectly encompasses that era of Spider-Man. Looking at Peter Parker as a character himself, he's an outcast. He doesn't have many friends, and he's actually kind of a jerk. Then looking at Spider-Man, he is hated. He's masked. He's a Spider-Man, a spider being one of the biggest fears in the world. And even with Spider-Man committing good deeds and saving the day, he is still constantly ridiculed by the Bugle, painting him as a villain. It's very easy to fall for that kind of propaganda. It's a guy in a masked suit swinging around, crawling on walls. It's very eerie. And I think that's done on purpose on Lee and Ditko's side. With both of their history with working on suspenseful and horror comics, this all is what really gives Ditko's style a very unique feel and vibe. Another thing I appreciate a lot about Ditko's Spider-Man is even though a bulk of this run was him in high school, there was still some sort of progression with Peter Parker. He started getting a little bit more muscular, and as easily as this could be chalked up as Ditko just drawing the character better because he's getting better the more he draws this character, I do think certain things are done on purpose. Spider-Man towards the end of Ditko's time with the character feels a little bit more heroic, which we'll get into when we talk about John Romita Sr. A really big turning point is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 33. This final chapter arc is one of the most talked about Spider-Man comics of all time. It's a really good issue to show the fundamentals of Peter Parker's Spider-Man, what he really cares for, why he's still doing it. And a huge part to why it's such a great issue is definitely Steve Ditko's artwork. I mean, the panels of Peter being stuck under the heavy machinery is, again, it's so iconic. It's been recreated multiple times in other mediums. Again, to kind of point out the change of his Spider-Man being that slim, lanky, kind of scary character to a more heroic type, you look at certain panels and
Spider-Man is ripped, he's buff, and obviously in this moment he needs to be. He's really pushing himself to the limit. It's these types of attentions to detail that really makes you appreciate Ditko's time with the character. Out of everything though, I think Ditko's best work comes in the Amazing Spider-Man Annual #2. A crossover with Ditko's other creation, Doctor Strange, really shows Ditko in his element. And it's just such a cool experience to see this character in such a different realm and world. We really hadn't seen it back then. It's Spider-Man doing more than just swinging around New York and punching bad guys. But even in the moments that Ditko is drawing Spider-Man swinging across New York and punching bad guys, it looks a lot different. Something about this issue just always has felt special to me. I don't know if it was an inking technique or a different inker, but everything seems more bold here, and I think it's on purpose. I think because you included Doctor Strange, Ditko wanted to go a little bit of a different route. It's a really engaging issue, and I think to me is the highlight of this 40+ issue run with the character. In conclusion, Ditko really set the bar high as Spider-Man's first artist, and it's really hard to imagine what any other artist would have done in those first 3 years. You could tell that Ditko put a lot of himself into the character of Peter Parker and therefore Spider-Man, and I think with that there came a lot of passion, and I think that's why the work was so great. Ditko's influence would stretch decades and is definitely going to stretch further. But what do you guys think? Are you a fan of Steve Ditko's Spider-Man? Have you read any of the Stan Lee and Ditko era Spider-Man? It really is some of my favorite comics, but let me know down below. Thanks so much for watching, and subscribe for more.